Today, I'm joined by Tonia Speir, SmartBug's leading expert in AgeTech. Today, we're talking all things about building marketing and sales programs in this industry. The AgeTech industry, in bringing a new product to market, requires you to understand a really nuanced approach to how do you get in front of the end user, the influencers, which are oftentimes the adult child, and then caregivers and others. And so today we're really going to be talking about how do you build and reach this type of target audience. And Tonia is going to take us through some of these different aspects in the AgeTech market. Tonia, thanks for joining today.
Thanks, Paul. It's good to be here. Good to see you always.
Yeah, so today, before we just jump into all of this, give us a high level of what is AgeTech? What is this market? Give me a little bit more about this.
Of course. So AgeTech is basically aging and technology. So it refers to any products or services that have been designed to support older adults. It's really about how we use technology to leverage, healthier lives, more independence, more connected lives, reducing loneliness. There's a lot of different things. It spans from apps that you use to robotics to monitoring systems. It's a lot of different things. So it can include everything from like health monitoring to telemedicine, all the way down to products that maybe caregivers are using. But essentially what we're trying to do, Paul, is bridge that gap between the aging and modern technology so that they can live, healthier, happier, more fulfilling lives.
It seems like a pretty wide market of different products and services. I know it's kind of a broad question, but given your experience in AgeTech, what are some of the most surprising misconceptions about older adult relationships with technology that you've encountered?
I think it's probably been, and Paul, in my experience from first as a marketer and for a long time, I chased this audience when they were at the age of pursuing luxury real estate, golf, resorts. And so it's an audience that I've been following for a really long time. And one thing, and now that they've kind of tipped into this aging stratosphere, it's interesting to still be chasing them, right? And understanding their behaviors. So I think that what I've encountered with them in technology is that, they were introduced to technology when they were working professionals as a part of their career. They're the first generation that didn't actually grow up with it, but has embraced it, somewhat throughout their life. And so with that, they're not scared of it, but they're not as trusting of it. And so that relationship with technology in their social life or in their personal life is a little bit different. They're not sure how it can, that trust factor of how can it improve my life, or why do I need it, or is my information safe? They're also a little vulnerable when it comes to it, whether they've been hacked before, or they hear about, older people getting scammed, but really kind of adopting that new technology, I think, is where that balance comes in of, making sure that it feels very simple, that it feels very trustworthy, easy to use. But I think more so than anything, it's positioning the value of the technology. So they're looking for technology to maybe manage whether it's health conditions or to stay socially engaged. They need to recognize the value of this technology and why it's something that they should pursue and build their trust in, or at least explore.
That makes sense. And so before we get into, marketing and sales approaches, I just want to understand just a little bit more about, what are some of the common challenges faced by seniors and their caregivers that this market really addresses? Because seniors, they're using a number of different types of technology. So to get a little bit more in depth into terms of this market, help me understand that a bit better.
Yes, I think accessibility is one. So traditional products and services weren't necessarily designed with older adults in mind, or people that maybe have physical or cognitive needs that they have. So, small buttons or a complex user interface, those things can be frustrating for senior adults or aging adults. And also back to that point, in the earlier question about not growing up with technology, it can feel very intimidating. And caregivers are the ones that are going to help us kind of bridge that gap. Back to, reiterating, and you're going to hear that a lot come up in a lot of answers, is the trust and the privacy concerns. They're highly targeted audience for scams because they are vulnerable. And in some regards, they can be a little bit naive when it comes to technology, but really making sure that you address the security and privacy when it comes to remote healthcare. It's a little different, I think, on the caregiver side. They're the ones who are going to be more positioned for like HIPAA privacy and data violation when it comes to that. Where privacy and concerns, I think, with the actual end user is going to be more monetary, right? Like, should I give you credit card information or should I give you, this information? But really educating them about cybersecurity and how that's becoming more common and allowing them to protect themselves online, and just that your business or organization has those measures in place. And I think another challenge that this audience faces is loneliness and isolation. Particularly where we're looking at an audience that at one time you would have, generationally speaking, right? People had more children. So when they were aging in their life, they maybe had like 3 caregivers to every one senior. And now, as we're seeing this kind of reverse happen with the baby boomer market and the large number of them, and less children or to be caregivers, we're going to ultimately over the next 5 to 10 years see that flip flop where there's going to be maybe one caregiver for every 3 seniors, and that's a big difference. And so with those caregivers that are trying to juggle multiple responsibilities and there's a lot of stress, like being able to offer that peace of mind of monitoring their loved one, helping them to manage their lives, that really kind of helps like track daily routines and kind of know a little bit more about where their loved one is without being there every second of the day. So I think it's a lot about promoting independence. It's a lot about reducing that isolation and just, again, like in the space of how can technology make your life more functionable and more accessible to you to live in a fulfilling way.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think that, I would like to get a little bit more into sort of questions I think that some of our marketing audience would be interested in hearing more about. Just in terms of segmentation. So when we're thinking about segmentation in go-to-market for AgeTech, there is the end user, there's the adult child, there's the caregiver, there's other influencers in place. When you're thinking about this type of market, who are like the actual decision makers in these types of purchase? Can you just kind of walk me through that? And like how should that impact like overall marketers' approach to how they're targeting within these campaigns?
Yeah, I think first, disclaimer there, it's always going to depend on the product or service. And it's going to depend on at what stage of aging is your product or service geared towards. Later stage things like from mobility, robotics, tools, things like that, they may be at a later stage. And so your primary decision maker there may be more so the healthcare provider or the adult child. Paul, did I freeze there for a second? Do we need to start that one over?
I'll just mark it. Yeah, you can start it over again and I can edit that out if you want to go.
Okay, I saw myself freeze, so I don't know if like it was just on my side or if it happens on your side too, but
all good. You can feel free to try again.
Okay, I'll pass it. Do you want to start the question again?
Sure. Yep, I'll start it again. So take me through a little bit more about, when we think about what marketers may be asking from a go-to-market perspective. There's a lot of different segments and personas that we're thinking about and how we have to target them. There's the senior, the adult children or other type of influencer. There's the caregiver. And so in reality, there could be different campaigns and different types of ads or different types of programs that you're running to get in front of the people that are ultimately going to make the decision or influence the decision. Tell me a little bit about the actual decision maker on this, and how should that impact a marketer's approach to getting in front of them?
Yeah, so you've hit on all 3 of them, right? The senior themselves, the adult child, and also the healthcare provider. I think, quick disclaimer that it could be based on the product or service and at what phase of aging it's geared towards. Later stage aging, it might be, where the adult child or the healthcare provider is the person making the decision on that person's behalf for their well-being. But, earlier stage, mid-stage, I think that senior is still going to be the ultimate person that you have to win over because they're the ones who are going to be using it. And adoption is key to them. What's different here is how you speak to each one of these audiences. So the adult child is going to really, and a lot of times they're going to be your champion. They're going to be the ones that are going to ask probably the most questions. And in terms of sales strategy, you're going to have to emphasize that it gives that, what's in it for me. And, that should be the core of any marketer's strategy, right? What's in it for me? What's in it for that buyer? And when you've got multiple parties like this, that what's in it for me is different for each one. So as the adult child, what's in it for them? It's peace of mind. It's ease of use for their loved one. What are the practical benefits? I think for the senior, it's going to be, how simple is it? What's the value in it? Like, what is it doing for me? And I think there's, different aspects of how you convey that in your messaging. For the healthcare provider, that's another influencer type role in this, another champion that you want to win over. And so for them, I think it's going to be, they're there to earn credibility and to be a resource for whether it's a patient or if it's, someone in like assisted living that they're helping or caring for. It's more of that, the empathy that they're offering, that like, hey, here's something that I can bring to you, and here's something that I know is going to help to make your life easier. So being able to tailor your messaging to each one of these audiences that involves multiple stakeholders, it's going to have to address the concerns of each one of these audiences. Like, for instance, like a fall detection device might be marketed to the adult child as a way, that they can, kind of keep an eye on mom when you're not there. If you had to run to the store, if you had to, go to a work meeting or something like that. And for the senior themselves, that messaging has to be built around the value it brings to their life, the simplicity of use, that trust factor for, that you're protecting their data, that and also maybe a simple sales strategy that allows them to ease into the product as a way of earning trust. So if you're able to offer a trial period or a demo, but something that helps to make them comfortable during that buying process. So understanding the role that each one of these participants can play in the buying process and tailoring your messaging to each.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. As this market starts to heat up and there's more competitors in this space, organizations really need to be thinking about how do they make their message cut through, the sort of sameness that they're hearing in the marketplace. Can you think of any, examples, or can you think about, or do you have any advice in terms of differentiating your organization in an increasingly crowded market with some of the tech that you're talking about?
You're right, it is crowded. And I think that anytime you can build that emotional connection is going to be key. Building that emotional connection of what are the positive outcomes that this technology, this device, or this product is bringing to you. One of the things that I go back to, and one of the poster children, I think, in this is when Apple rolled out their hearing aid aided device, right, for AirPods. And when I think about that, the positive outcome was not positioning the person as aging or positioning the person as having a problem, or, hey, you need to have better hearing so that if your fire alarm goes off, you're safe. They positioned it around the holidays and children opening presents under a Christmas tree, and like being able to hear that joy and amplifying that sound and that emotion and making that emotional connection to the product and the positive out of how it's making your life better. And I think those are the ones that really win for me in the marketing space. Some other things that you have to look out for is when you're positioning that peace of mind element. Is it easy to set up? Is it easy to integrate with other devices that you have? What type of maintenance is required? Differentiating yourselves from making sure that it's not just tech that's coming into your life, but it's something simple. It's something easy to use. It's something easy to maintain. And again, giving that clear value for that caregiver, that family, that end user, and stressing the positive outcomes. Those are the things that I think that win. And you also can't forget that it also has to be empathy driven, and the messaging has to be respectful of that audience and tone. They don't want to perceive themselves as aging. They don't want to be talked down to, even though, technology may be difficult for them or maybe harder for them. That's not a part of, you don't want to be patronizing in the way that you get that message across. So I think it just needs to come from a place of honest help and care of making their lives or improving their lives and the day-to-day. And I would also add to that too, like for healthcare providers, how does it improve the outcome of them being able to do their job? Or how does it make them more efficient? Or how does it help with compliance? Anytime you can educate, people always like to see themselves in ads, and people always like to see themselves in demos. So making sure that, if a senior is buying for themselves and they're opening up this app and they're getting a demo, that it's not someone, 10, 20 years their junior teaching them how to use this app, but really kind of positioning people that look like them, talk like them, understand where they're coming from, that are kind of walking them through. And those are little touches that I think you can pepper into your marketing strategy and that messaging strategy to make it more impactful.
Yeah, I think that you made a good point. I think that empathy component it really resonates. It goes a long way in that type of messaging. So when you're thinking about for a marketing team that's trying to get in front of this audience, that nobody has unlimited budgets. So we have to think about how we're going to allocate budget across, towards the end user, the influencer, the caregiver, or anything like that. How do you think about capital allocation and with the most successful channels or most effective channels in reaching older adults and their families? And, what's your advice in thinking about how you allocate limited resources and being able to get in front of this type of audience?
You have to know that you have to be able to combine channels, but more so knowing your buyer, and back to the point we chatted about earlier with knowing what phase of aging your product services. That's going to kind of dictate who toggles to the top of that priority chain. Is it the senior themselves or is it the adult child? Who's going to have the most impact in making that ultimate decision or making the purchase? And then where are they? What channels are they utilizing? Because it's very different. You might find my dad, who's perfect audience for this, is, he sometimes is scrolling TikTok, or he's on Facebook, where he connects with old friends. I'm not on Facebook. I'm very rarely on TikTok. My generation was more Instagram, right? And so that's where you're going to find me. But I think to some degree, you have to be cognizant of combining these channels and social media and leveraging SEO, but don't devalue the importance of reviews, because that's another great place to that doesn't have an age, discrimination on it. It's going to be a review as a review, and being able to foster those, encourage those, and be found, particularly from an SEO perspective, that's going to boost your awareness and also that trust factor within the brand.
Yeah, that makes sense on the review side of things for sure. What about distribution strategy? So, different ways that you can get in front of your audience. You can go direct to consumer, you can partner with senior living communities. What factors should these startups be thinking about when making this choice from a distribution perspective?
Again, who the target customer is, and where that influential voice is going to come from. Also think about what are the factors with your product or service that you're offering. Does it require a lot of setup? Does it require a lot of support or training, where these organizations or for lack of a better word, channel partners can kind of come in and help support for ease of use or for getting the message out? One of the products that I was recently exposed to does VR for senior living. And, that's something that seniors can use both at home themselves to increase cognitive behavior, or it could be something that a senior living team buys and utilizes on site. But at least they can be a champion for helping to show how easy it is, how you use it, what it does for you, what those benefits are. So I think that it's going to be making sure that you understand, number one, where does the product service fit in? Who are we targeting? And then what type of partnerships make sense? In some ways, it could be the healthcare provider. It could be a nurse. It could be a doctor. It could be someone that the organizations that drop in and will visit seniors so that they have, extra touch points of, social exposure throughout the week. It could be partners like that. So I really think, where are they going to use it? How difficult is it to use? And how can you get them on board to maybe shorten some of your sales cycles?
So I think we've talked about all the 4 Ps of marketing except pricing. So tell me about on the pricing side of things. How do you approach pricing conversations when you're often selling to one group? Maybe you're selling to the adult child, but the product is actually used by the senior. What is the best practice for that?
I think, is it emotional or is it practical? And understanding that value is going to be key here, not so much, the cost, but you have to be sensitive to it, because again, they're coming into something, number one, not wanting to acknowledge that they're aging, and number two, buying into something technology that they don't necessarily maybe trust So I think that building the value around the outcome of what it's going to provide is going to be key for that adult child. It might be a little more of an emotional play, making sure that mom or dad are healthy and that you have that peace of mind. Whereas for the senior themselves, it might be a little more practical. So helping them to prioritize their independence, being able to do things on their own, which makes them feel better about themselves. And, I think so if you can lead with, here's the value, it's simple. We've made it for you. Like, we don't have small buttons. We don't have small type. Like, it's designed with you in mind, and that there aren't long-term maintenance things or gotchas. I think transparency in that cost is also important as well, to help them in their minds create the framework for what that value is and why they need it.
Yeah, so you bring up a little bit around usability. And so another area that I've been curious about is just trying to maintain stickiness of the product. So how do you think about what's an effective strategy to getting seniors to actually try and stick with a new technology product? This is something they're not used to using. What are some approaches that you take from that perspective?
Can't underscore the word adoption enough. So, again, like making sure that they are trained properly, that they understand how they're using it, why they're using it, what it can do for them, and being able to check in on your customers. Like, it's not a set and forget. Like, this is an audience that's going to require nurturing post-sale. Nurturing them post-sale, your quick win is going to be, do they see instant value in this? Like, that's going to be a win right there. That comes from making sure they were trained properly and that they know how to use it and that they're getting that value right out of the gate. But secondly, making sure that they continue to use it, that adoption factor, and continuing to get the most out of the product or service. That's what's going to be that catalyst for your reviews and that word of mouth spreading, and a lot of, influencers from your caregivers to your, senior living communities and nurses and doctors, being able to say, this is a good thing, you should do this. And that's going to come from, if it's simple to use, if it's adopted right out of the gate, and if you follow through with your customer success to make sure that they're continuing to see value in the product or service.
Got it. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense from a usability perspective. Let's talk a little bit about sales communication, sales enablement tips for so when you're thinking about your sales teams and training your sales team to communicate effectively with both seniors and their adult children, what are some tips that you have? Because when I think about CRM structure and segmenting the people that are in your database, like, you need to really have a clear idea of who you're communicating with. What kinds of other best practices, when you think about it from a sales enablement perspective, do you have to just, most effectively communicate with both types of audiences?
A key here is you have to understand your why. And you have to be able to articulate that through your brand messaging without alienating either one of those audiences. So you're going to have to make sure that it's speaking to the senior adult, making sure that they understand, hey, this is going to give you more independence, or it's going to allow you to maintain more control over your life, and messaging to that adult child, which is prioritizing, the health and safety of their loved one, making sure that they have that peace of mind that they're being cared for, and making sure that the sales team understands the difference of those motivating factors and the differences of the why for each one of those audiences, that it isn't just hey, here's all the great products and features that our company can offer you. The products and features might be the same for both audiences, but how you position those is distinctly different for each one of those buyers, because the motivating factor behind it is different for each one of them. And so you have to tailor that to make sure that it's speaking directly to both of them. Again, like, empathy in messaging to both is going to be key. It's going to require patience, and it's going back to, like, it can't sound patronizing. Like, it's got to be, very, like, this was made for you, and you've got to be able to really find balance in that conversation. I think that if you can weave in, whether it's real life examples or storytelling models, those are always really effective with this type of audience. And that third party credibility of people who have used it, what it's done for them, maybe what it prevented or what it allowed. Like, I think back to that holiday, around the tree opening presents, like what that positive outcome was.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. So this last section, I wanted just to ask a couple questions on measuring success. Reporting is so important. And when you think about age tech organizations, there could be venture funded, may not be, maybe bootstrapped, but they're always looking at how do we measure success at the end of the day. What are some metrics that you find valuable in predicting long-term success with senior users?
I think that, adoption is definitely a measure of success. But then engagement, how often are they using it? What does usage look like? That's going to indicate, are they seeing value in it? So you can have someone adopt it and you get into it with it. Those long-term metrics aren't tracked for usability. And that's also going to help define how you scale the business too. Where are we finding ways that we can make it simpler to use? Or where are we finding ways that we can enhance the value? Or make things a little bit, more, not necessarily with technology, we have a tendency to get overcomplicated and make things more robust, which makes things harder to use. This is almost a perfect, example of how do you do that? How do you scale with that while also maintaining your simplicity? And I think user feedback and satisfaction is a big part of that. Making sure that they're letting you know like where those barriers are or where they're maybe getting frustrated, which you don't want. You want to avoid friction at all costs and make sure that the usability is there. So I think from feedback to adoption to usability, retention, all those are going to feed into that long-term success. And then as another value metric, I would say, what are people talking about it? Are we getting positive influence from people recommending it? And by what are they saying about us? I think that's another good metric to watch too, to make sure that your brand awareness is taking shape the way that you want it to and gaining some traction in that digital space.
Yeah, those third-party reviews, those go a long way just from influencing the end user influencers themselves. So I guess just my last question you speak to a lot of age tech organizations, and what's some of the biggest lessons that you've learned in scaling this type of company that you kind of learned along the way in all the consulting work that you've done with these types of groups?
I think that building trust is the number one thing that they probably struggle with. And that's just the key to really, getting right out of the gate. It's almost like these puzzle pieces that all perfectly fit together. You have to have trust in the beginning. And how do you build trust? You've got to make sure that your messaging's right. Messaging becomes a little complicated because you're speaking to two distinctly different audiences, sometimes three. And so how do we articulate our value proposition through that messaging to make sure that we are building that trust? And then are we who we say we are? Being able to measure the things like adoption and retention to make sure that the long-term value of the product or service is really displayed through usage. And then that triggers up that last puzzle piece, which is power of word of mouth, making sure that people are talking about it and, giving you high recommendations and talking to their peers or their caregivers or even their doctors to say, hey, I tried this and this is really working well for me. So in this audience, scaling isn't just about the marketing, but it's also about creating that experience that people are excited to share with their friends and family.
Tonia, this is a great conversation today, and it really helped me understand more sales and marketing approaches and getting in front of this type of audiences. Where can people find you online if they have any questions, any follow-ups for you?
Sure. You can find me online on LinkedIn. Tonia Speir is my profile. You can also email me at tspeir@smartbugmedia.com, or you can always ring me up at 843-455-6617.
Tonia, thank you so much for joining today, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks, Paul.